Hello and welcome to BharatShakti.in. I'm Riri Chatterjee, editor of BharatShakti.in. Just the other day, we were talking about Mr. Modi's visit to France and our expectations from that visit. Today, we're going to take stock of what's actually happened and how's the visit gone. To go through the basis, I have with me Mr. Nitin Gokhale. Nitin, welcome to Bharat Shakti. You're on home. How's it going there? How's the weather?
The weather is turned bad. It's gloomy. It's cloudy. It rained in the morning. I think it'll open up a little bit later. But just when we were trying to record outdoors this program from one of the beautiful spots in Paris, it started raining. So I had to come down to the hotel, back to the hotel, and then now sitting in the room and recording this program with you again. So anyway, I think that doesn't take away from the very bright and very important outcomes from Prime Minister Modi's visit to France, which
Now, I
concluded
want to
Friday night.
if I want to first ask you, Nitin, in this gloomy weather, how is the Indian diaspora there taking his visit? Are they really elated about it? What's it like?
Well, they are certainly the Indian diaspora in France is not as vibrant or as big as it is in, say, the UK or the United States. But it nevertheless has important elements to it. The program that Prime Minister Modi did with the diaspora was on the day of his arrival on the 13th of July. So that time there was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of interaction, and as the Prime Minister has perfected the art of interacting with them and motivating them over the last 9 years, it was again evident how proud they felt about India's progress and India's development in the past few years. And that was very evident. So on the outcomes, it is difficult to get all the reactions because one, it's holiday season now in France, and two, all the outcomes were put out in the public domain only around 10 p.m. last night. And today being Saturday, most people are either on leave or the offices are closed and they're traveling. But preliminary indications are that everyone is happy with, especially 2 or 3 people-centric decisions that have been taken. One is the use of UPI in the Eiffel Tower area, where Indian tourists can use the UPI app that India has developed for payments and using, trying to pay for taxis and hotels and other facilities. The second is the long-term visas for Indian students who have studied in France. So the visa duration might be increased to 5 years is what the decision is. And finally, one more, and a consulate, Indian consulate to be opened in Marseille, which is not very close to Paris, will also help the Indians. So people-centric decisions are welcome. As far as the outcomes on foreign policy and defense are concerned, people, only those of us who watch that space are more interested in looking at or analyzing these outcomes. But I think overall it was a brilliant visit, brilliant outcomes. And the stage is set for the next 25 years of India-France strategic partnership.
Right. And then one of the important things, and now we'll get on to the military issues and the strategic issues really, is about the AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, and our co-developing engine technology and engine for these aircrafts. So if you can give us the details about that.
Yes, in fact, it came as a pleasant surprise that the intention to co-develop, co-design and co-develop and co-manufacture a fresh military jet engine between India and France through Safran Military Engines Company and DRDO came as a bit of a pleasant surprise because the indications were that there were some reservations in the Indian establishment and also about cost and time that this kind of a engine might take. But I think those fears have been allayed, those fears have been set to rest. And therefore, it is, in my view, the single most significant announcement after this trip, where India is going to get the technology and will own the IP eventually when it happens. Of course, it's a long way to go. It might take up to a decade to develop that engine. But once it happens, it will be the engine of choice for the advanced medium combat aircraft, which the Indian Air Force hopes to induct in service in mid 2030s. So there is hope that India will get a sovereign control over a technology that has been denied to it all these years for 75 years by bigger and technologically more advanced nations. I think that is the single most significant decision that I would think should be noted and should be analyzed.
Right. One sees your point, absolutely. What about the helicopter area? The IMRS, the Indian multi-role helicopter, and developing of the Shakti engine for it. There's been some development on that also, which also looks very positive. What do you have to say?
Oh, it does. In fact, it finds a mention in the joint statement or the outcome statement also, where it says Horizon 2047, the next 25 years of India's France strategic partnership, where any case, Safran Helicopter Engine Division and the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited had concluded a memorandum of understanding last year to develop and strengthen the cooperation in helicopter engines. And now that the IMRH, the Indian multi-role helicopter that the HAL is planning, will be powered by a Safran engine has been decided. It has got a stamp of approval from both the governments because it is now included in the vision or outcome statement between the two governments. So that will get a boost. Already, Safran and HAL are in the process of setting up the facility in Hyderabad to manufacture these engines. And of course, it will give a boost to both civil and military aviation in India, which I think is a significant enhancement of the Make in India component of Indian government's Atmanirbharta policy in defense.
Right, get on to our submarines, Nitin. We expected perhaps a little more clarity on the Scorpion issue, but it doesn't seem to have been clarified in exact terms, I would say, in the
Well,
joint
I
declaration.
think there seems to be some kind of a confusion in that, or at least they didn't want to put it out explicitly that Scorpion submarines, three of them will be acquired by India as a follow-on order to the first six, which have been under construction or sort of have been under the contract since the first decade of this century, and the last of the submarines in that project is about to be commissioned or will be commissioned in the or joining the Indian Navy. The expectation in the company, the naval group, some of the officials who I met, both in Safran and in naval group, is that many of the procedures in India take time to fructify, and I think even the MEA has been sort of slightly confused in putting out the document because in the first document that was put up briefly and then taken down, it did mention Scorpion by name and also talked about the follow-on orders for three more submarines. But the subsequent statement, which are available online, doesn't mention this specifically. But I'm sure those finer details are being worked out, and eventually this will happen. Although competitors of Mazgaon Docks Limited, which is a public sector unit in the Indian private sector, are slightly annoyed and disappointed that the nomination game of continuing to nominate production of defense platforms still continues. But I think for the government, it makes complete sense that the skills that have been gathered and acquired or have been built up over the years in the Mazagaon Docks Limited, those cannot be allowed to wither away. And since the Indian Navy is in a hurry to get submarines because its submarine strength or the submarine fleet is depleting faster than it can acquire new submarines, this makes full sense that three follow-on order or three submarines are acquired in a follow-on mode by the government. So it will happen, is my sense going forward. I think the final or the fine print was not finalized, and therefore the document doesn't mention that in such specific terms as it was initially mentioned.
One omission, one rather prominent omission is There is no reference to the Rafale Marine, the 26 aircraft. We thought they were almost landing on the deck. That sort of an issue. And then I find no mention of it anywhere in the document. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think the same principle applies. Remember the DAC, the Defense Acquisition Council's approval for acquiring 26 Rafale Marines for the Indian Navy was accorded on the day the Prime Minister was on his way to Paris. Before he was landing, it was approved. But eventually, I think the entire file has to be finalized about cost, time, timeline, and the kind of enhancements that the Indian Navy will be looking for from Rafale. And I think the government has learned the right lessons from what happened in 2016 when it acquired 36 Rafales for the Indian Air Force. When the opposition perceived it to be an underhand deal, a deal that bypassed procedures and set rules and regulations, which eventually, when the Supreme Court gave a clean chit to the government, so there was no such deviation in the way it was acquired. But here, since we are just less than a year away in the election mode of the general elections coming up in 2024, the government perhaps wanted to make sure that no loophole is left to be exploited by the opposition. And therefore, I think the negotiations will continue. Remember, Dassault Aviation, the company that manufactures Rafale Marine or Rafales, has put out a statement immediately after the outcome statement was made public. And very cleverly, it mentions that India has, Dassault Aviation has won the contest or the competition to give the tech-based fighters for the INS Vikrant, India's own indigenous aircraft carrier. It doesn't mention whether it talks about what the governments have done here in Paris. I think it refers to the approval of the DSC. Nevertheless, as I mentioned, it will come once all the final details are on the table and both sides agree to it. Then probably the Cabinet Committee on Security will give the clearance, and then probably both the governments will declare it, like it happened in the Rafale acquisition in 2016. That from 2015 April, when the Prime Minister announced the intention in Paris to buy those Rafales off the shelf, the contract would take place, or the signing of the contract happened only in September 2016. So we have to give it time. I don't think there is much to be concerned about or alarmed about that the Rafales are not coming for INS Vikrant. INS Vikrant needs fighter jets, and I think the government is seized of that matter. It's just a matter of time before that decision is announced or declared.
Right, maybe let's get out of the equipment cycle and we'll talk about the Indian Ocean region a bit, and or Indo-Pacific, the way you like to look at it. France is a major Indian Ocean power, actually speaking, with the territories in California and Polynesia, French Polynesia. Now, there is a lot of talk about that in the joint document that's come across. How do you really read all that is there?
So I think while both countries are aware about each other's presence in the Indian Ocean region and acknowledge each other's importance in the Indian Ocean region, both are resident Indian Ocean powers, as you mentioned. But the center of gravity as far as the international global contest is concerned has shifted to Indo-Pacific, as we know now. And therefore, both India, France, along with third countries like the UAE and Australia, have decided to do trilateral cooperation. So there is a India, France, Australia trilateral cooperation in maritime domain. And there is a India, India, UAE, France trilateral cooperation that began early this year in January. And with the Prime Minister having gone to, as we speak, is in the UAE on his way back from France. He has stopped over there. I'm sure it will be taken forward. So both countries look for Indian Ocean region, of course, but Indo-Pacific as a larger construct, which is important because of China's increasing forays into the Indian Ocean region via the larger Indo-Pacific. And clearly, China is the elephant in the tent, and all countries are strategizing to contain and cooperate with China at the same time, like France is doing and like India has to do, because it has both its problems as well as some of the sourcing of the trade, I would say, raw material that India sources is from China even now. So all countries are looking at de-risking, as they call it now. That's a new fashionable word. Instead of decoupling, everybody's saying we need to de-risk and diversify our supply chains. And that's exactly what India and France are looking to do in their Indo-Pacific strategy.
The Chinese are not just the elephant, they're elephant run amok, I think. Anyway, let's go further. There are lots of issues actually. Nathan, I can keep you occupied there for quite some time, like terrorism, and then there is reform of Security Council, etc. But I will not go into so much of detail. Just in case you have any final note, anything that you want.
So I think you rightly mentioned terrorism, cooperation on intelligence sharing. But I think two aspects we must look at going forward. One is, of course, the civil nuclear sector, where the modular small reactors are being thought about as the way forward. And the Jaitapur project is under discussion between the two governments. The other is space, with India now becoming more and more focused on use of space, both for civil and military applications. And with the Chandrayaan, coincidentally, the mission having got off the ground on Friday itself, even as the two leaders were meeting in Paris. I think there is a lot of scope. France and India have been partners in space for a long time. And therefore, it's only clear or only natural that they will take their space cooperation to the next level. All that has been mentioned in the outcome document. And finally, my thoughts are that having done very well in the first 25 years of its strategic partnership, which started in 1998, the outcome document, which mentions 2047 as the next horizon, next 25 years for the India-France strategic partnership. Remember, I think France is among the rare Western powers which does not have so many strings attached to what it does with India, unlike the others. And France does not lecture India on human rights as the other European nations tend to do, even when they do not have the weight to punch actually in the global arena. Like what we've been seeing in the EU, the Parliament having adopted some resolution against India on situation in Manipur. Earlier, they've done this for J&K. So France recognizes India's rising status and recognizes its importance to the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. And therefore, I think this visit, barely 1.5 days, has been a significant movement in the India-France strategic relationship. So we'll have to see how these outcomes are implemented. But at the moment, at least, let's savor the positive outcomes that have come. And in my view, some of them historic. But again, that is an overused term in many ways. But I think the advanced medium compact jet engine, a fresh jet engine, that will be worth all the hard work that has been done by both sides for this visit and earlier. And
right, thank you, Nitin. Thanks for sparing your time.
It's always a pleasure. It's our own thing, so we must do it. But that's how it is. We'll have more details coming out in the coming couple of days. I had a chance to visit a couple of factories and a meeting with some of the officials of the defense companies, which I will talk about as I get back to India very soon.
Thank you, viewers. Thanks for tuning into BharatShakti.in. Do tune in now and then, and you will find such informative pieces being broadcast over here. Also, get on to our social media pages. Thank you so much.